Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
associated with the creation
or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked
and sometimes what didn't.
You will also hear very personal experiences
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
and inspire you to do even greater things.
It's not often that I get a chance to sit across a table from our podcast guests, especially in these times when most of us are working remotely. So an opportunity like this one was then hard to pass for both our guest in the Software People Stories this week, Madhavi Nadig, and myself, where Madhavi shared her stories from the time she knew she had to see things differently and so do them and experience what it was that she truly wanted to do. She's a developer, product manager, and volunteer who believes in not only getting the job done, but getting it done well. Madhavi shares her ways of learning about users, her experiences on bringing Spotify music to India, and an amazing volunteer project where she created a space and enabled people to volunteer to record 100 stories in English with an Indian accent to help listeners in India. There are small tips for everyone in this episode, so listen on. So good morning, Madhavi. Very warm welcome to you to the Software People Stories podcast. It's wonderful having you here with us, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Chitra. It's great to be here.
So can we start with your origin story, Madhavi? Where did your interest in technology begin? How did you get started?
Interest in technology. I would say I've been a bit of a rebel always. So interest in technology also was a little bit of being rebellious. So I wanted to become a doctor. Until 10th standard, you're forced to study biology. And after that, you have the choice. So I said, I'm going to become a vet. Not a human doctor, but a veterinary doctor. And my family was opposed to that. So I said, I'm just going to drop biology. Why study something that I'm never going to use? My mother is a doctor, but I didn't want to follow in her footsteps. And I had realized by then that I had a knack for programming, whatever little was learned at school. So that's how I ended up here.
So I presume that you took a degree in computer science or, studied engineering. And then how did your career or your journey in the world of software pan out thereafter?
I did my bachelors in engineering from PESIT Bangalore. And after that, I have done a master's in computer science from the University at Buffalo, New York. So when I was studying for my bachelor's, the curriculum kind of didn't really satisfy me. I felt a lot of things were thrust upon me. So I wanted to study certain things because I wanted to study, not because it's going to get me a job. So that's what I did during my master's. And then at the end of master's, I was like, wait a minute, I've studied all these things, like, how am I going to get a job now? But it panned out, and I worked with EMC. I did an internship there and then converted that to a full-time position, worked a little bit as a QA test automation engineer over there. And then I was like, I need to work in a small startup. And also EMC's headquarters was in Hopkinton, and that was a very little small town, village kind of a thing. I wanted the hustle bustle of city, and I loved Boston, so I wanted to be close. So I found a startup there and joined it. It's called Jumptap. It was into mobile advertising. At that time, the joke was, do you get buses and trucks painted with advertisements? No, that's not what we mean by mobile advertising. So mobile advertising was still an up-and-coming field, and it's not as established as it is today. And then Jumptap got acquired by Millennial Media. So from a 70% company, we now went into about a 500% company. And then 2 years later, that got acquired by AOL. And now we were one among tens of thousands. And that was way too much for me. So I said, I need to find something else where, I can make a significant contribution. Luckily for me, at that point, I got to know there's a Spotify office in Boston. So I applied and I got through. They were like, it's really hard to get in there and all of that. I liked it, they liked me, so it worked out great for all of us. And I spent, I think, 3.5 years or so working over there. Part of it in Boston and some of it from here in Bangalore. because in 2018 I moved back to Bangalore. And that's how I've been in like 3 different industries, doing different things, whatever catches my fancy.
That's really nice. So, across these industries, as a programmer, what have been some of your fundamental principles that you've imbibed over the years as a developer, as a programmer? And what are some instances that you can share that perhaps became learning moments or moments of truth for you as somebody who said that she has a knack for computers?
So from the beginning, even during my college days, my friends used to tease me, if you want the most optimized code, go to Madhavi. So that's how I started my career, trying to optimize every little thing about the algorithm and how is the memory being managed and all of that. And then I joined the startup, Jumptap. We did a lot of experimental things there during the Jumptap and millennial media stage, so about a span of 4 years. And I also got to interact and work very closely with a lot of senior engineers at that point. So I was this really young, raw engineer. So then I realized that my level of optimization wasn't really required. It was becoming more of a hindrance, especially for a prototype. You don't really want the highly optimized version. You want to make sure that it does what it does to prove that you can achieve whatever functionality it is that you're trying to build and deliver. So that was one of the first learning things, a mindset change. That let's go with making sure we get the MVP in place. And the MVP should not have a lot of bells and whistles because it's just going to prolong how long it is going to take to release the MVP. So that was one of them. And the other thing was cut out the bells and whistles from MVP. So as I progress in my career, I've been in a position where I've had to work with other people and give them more for guidance to get it developed by them, because maybe that team owned the component or maybe I didn't have the expertise to work on it myself. And there also everybody wants to add all these extra features. I'm like, no, cut it out. Bare bones, bare bones. Get me the bare bones. Once we show this MVP works, then we can move forward. Another thing that I learned at Spotify was like, don't just build something just because you feel like. Have some data backing that. Right? A lot of companies just like dive into it from a gut feel. I think nowadays there's more of a shift to have a data-driven decision making. In my early career, I wasn't exposed to that. Later on, I got into it, and now I apply that to all areas of my life.
So actually, that's very interesting. You said as a developer, you focused on optimization, you focused on, keeping it clean, ensuring that the code serves its purpose. And don't just build something, but back it with data. So on that last point, I've often noticed that developers are highly creative people. They love to create and build code. So how did you develop this practice of allowing data or using data to ensure that you're building the right thing or building exactly what is needed?
So initially, when I was first introduced to this kind of thinking, I was still a young engineer and I didn't really understand what was the need for all of that. But I got involved into that, and then I started realizing that the features that we built as a team, because our team lead or my manager made sure we did some of these. And I'm really lucky to have had some really good mentors. I'm very grateful to them for guiding my career. So through them, I got introduced to this, and I started observing that the features we were delivering had lesser error. So they were exactly what the users wanted. So although it was taking a lot longer to get to the decision part, and it wasn't just like, okay, let's just decide in this room and let's just build something. I realized that those would stick, and they would stick on for a lot longer than we'd expected to. We would build it as a prototype, but they survived way past that. So that was a learning experience. And also Spotify has this entire mindset of data-driven decision making. So it was a very easy jump for me from my previous company to Spotify. And I just got involved in it. Some of the projects I worked in Spotify were also like involving multiple languages. And basically we were trying to optimize the recommendations in Spotify to cater to the Indian audience, because Spotify was not yet in India at that point of time. I'm talking from 2016 to about 2018-19. Yeah, 2019 is when it was released here. So this is what we were doing over there. And in India, again, music is out there in like so many different languages. I am one person. I know Kannada, English, Hindi. and barely a little bit of Hindi at that. So how am I supposed to expect and cater to like audiences in each of these different languages? So the way I did it is, let me see which languages have the most traction, so that whatever little change I do, that is going to serve the most number of people. So it was also impact driven that way. And that's how I made my decision making, and that's how my team supported me, and all of us went ahead that way.
Going back to building based on data, a lot of companies, and I recently read somewhere, most of the users use only about 20% of the features, whereas companies near the 80% of the expenditure on building those features literally goes waste. I mean, as somebody who's been in the midst of code and someone who uses data to make decisions on what to build, and you also mentioned that you've seen that certain features have a lot of stickiness. How can a company that's just starting up and measure that stickiness or usability or feature usage, to ensure that, hey, okay, we got this right? Especially when you talk about experiments and MVPs, right? That's the place a lot of people struggle, especially when you're developing new products or maybe looking at new markets. So what is it that you can do upfront or preemptively in the code that through which you can measure its effectiveness or usage?
So I feel like if there is something similar to whatever you want to build, you can try to take that data and extrapolate. There are some challenges there. Maybe it's owned by a company and you don't have access to that data. Maybe you can talk to some people over there and try to get a feel for what their user responses are and how that is guiding it. Or maybe you can find experts in the field who can kind of give you an idea, because if your idea is a brand new thing that's not out there in the market.
So I guess where I was coming from was looking at instrumentation within the code itself.
Yes, but for instrumentation, you still need to have some decisions in place. Like you have to have at least one or two alternatives. Or you just be like, I'm going to put all my money on one thing and just go ahead with building this thing. There's no A/B testing over there. You just go ahead with that one thing and then see how are people reacting to it. You have to build in instrumentation, make sure you're collecting data at all the significant points. Then there's that story. The next part of it would be like actually talking to the users and getting their feedback. Like, what do you think about it? Because the instrumentation data can tell you a certain story, but that could just be because of the way you've programmed your user flows. Maybe there's something the user is looking for that is not even part of your flow. And to get that perspective, you really need to talk to users. So I would say it has to be both.
So has that happened at any point in time with you?
With me? Yeah, I mean, for these recommendation stuff, that's how we did it. So there were certain stories that the data was saying based on whatever instrumentation was there. We added a few more data collection points. That would still not give us the complete picture. After that, it was just a question of talking to different people. And because the product was not yet in India, right, it was really hard for us to get the actual feedback from them. So we did a proxy for it. We asked other different colleagues and other people whom we could approach, whether be it on a phone call and all of that. There was a whole market research part. But I also needed to know how good are the recommendations that we are giving, which we didn't get such a good idea from just the pure market research. Market research was more, this is like a small niche out of a huge big thing. So for those specific answers, we went ahead and tried to collect data ourselves.
This is also something that maybe many developers hesitate to do, is actually talk to users. So as somebody who's, based on whatever you've said so far, who's been on both sides, you understand the code, you've been a developer, you also have in some sense displayed empathy towards the user to understand how they may be using it, or to see what is it that you've missed. What is it that you have done differently to develop that empathy and make that part and parcel of your way of working?
See, my rebelliousness comes there also. Anytime there is something given to me, I want to see how can I break this. Like, what are the ways I can break it? It's okay, I just want that list of ways I can break it, and then we'll see which is the majority path. Because everybody doesn't think like me, they just go through this. Because I am approaching it from the perspective of, I want to break this. User approaches it from the perspective of, I want to get my job done. So like you said, that 20% thing is what is most important. But knowing where the other hitches are, that's sufficient for me. So this is the way I approach it. And first I do it myself, make note of whatever I have observed. Then I talk to different people to try and see, did they find all the things I did or did they find anything new. So there's a little bit of a game going on there also.
Okay. So when you have you actually been in conversation with real users at any point in time? And what is it that you've taken away from those conversations?
Yes, I have been in conversations because Spotify especially, I joined the company because I wanted to work on a product that would end up in users' hands. So I could basically approach anybody and be like, hey, what do you think? And get some totally different perspective of them, depending on whom I'm talking to. Because even if they have the exact same background, their music preferences could be like polar, totally opposite from each other. So there's a lot of these things that I would do naturally. And also Spotify has this kind of an aura. Anytime in any social setting, if somebody got to know I'm in Spotify, they'll be like, hey, I use this feature. I love that feature. Or like, I wish you guys could tweak this thing. Do you think you can do that? So there was these casual conversations also that was happening. That was very good feedback for me. And also we had actual user interviews, user researchers doing these interviews, recording videos. I would just sit and watch them because I wanted to know what's going on in users' mind. Yeah.
What were some of the major pain points out of sheer curiosity? Especially because Spotify and music, and like you said, there's such diversity in taste and choice of how people consume music. It must have been a humongous task or a challenge to be able to distill the essence of all those conversations to make sure that you are satisfying most people that you address. So what were some of those pain points that you were able to listen to, if you can share?
Sure. First thing I have to say that there is no uniform audience. Even if you have a certain set of personas, they are very country specific because culture changes that quickly. Even within the US, where they have one language and one nation and everything, the way music is consumed is very different. Some of it is dependent on race, some of it is dependent on your geographical location where you're exposed to certain ideas and stuff like that. So it was really hard to figure out what is going on. But still, we started with a few personas and tried to see how can we cater to those personas. So what ended up happening is that majority of the folks in the US, because the people building the algorithms had that background and could connect with them and had that direct feedback, it was working really well for them. But not so great for audiences in other places in the world. It was decently okay because it's the same algorithm, but now it's consuming different data. But how well are the models translating in each of those? That was slightly different. So this was not a one-team effort. This was a multi-team across locations kind of a thing. So one of the first experiments that worked out with Spotify was trying to bring Spanish music into the limelight. That there are a huge number of consumers, but English music was always number one. Then when they broke a few of the Spanish tracks into like the top 10, that was awesome. That was partly through these recommendation engines from Spotify and other such companies, right? So that was a big it gave us hope that we can do a lot more to cater to other audiences and try to get their tracks to the top around the world. It doesn't have to be nation specific or location specific or specific to a certain set of people. So we were working towards that. It's a huge challenge nonetheless, but small efforts towards that goal where you're catering to each of your niche audiences. One way to do that is to learn their preferences and try to start catering to them. So the same algorithm is now like working for different people by consuming their taste, and rather than recommending from one pool, if you have identified them as multiple pools, you can pull from those. So tastes also tend to change over time. So I could be totally into Hindi music right now, and tomorrow for some reason I got into like some Tamil filmy music or whatever, and I can't mix these two. I can be like, I really like hip hop, but even in hip hop, whether do I like hip hop in English, Hindi, Tamil, although you would put them into the same genre, right? So you have to adapt to my current taste. So it can't even just be like, I'm going to look at all of your history and figure out, because all of your history may lean towards a certain area, but your recent history is showing a new trend. So you need to be able to pick up this new trend as well. So these were some of the ways.
That's really fascinating. In fact, one takeaway I have from whatever you shared is the amount of layering that exists, and it's almost like peeling the layers of an onion to get to really what people want to listen to, and that in itself is a fascinating exercise. And with all these AI engines coming and constantly learning, it'll be interesting to see what emerges. I mean, we're just talking about one area of music, and there are so many other areas like that. So, yeah, definitely, devices like a Siri or an Alexa. I'm sure this is going to be a thing that many people are going to be trying to solve. Ultimately, I wonder what will come out of it.
See, in Siri and Alexa, there's another thing. They first need to be able to tell accents. So there's that added complication. So the same word can be pronounced differently by different people. And also there's the localization in terms of language usage. So again, you are basically getting into culture. So how well do you understand the culture of the audience you're catering to comes into the play.
As somebody who's worked globally, how has it been? And you just mentioned that you probably worked with many teams across the globe and while creating products or experiences. What have been some of your takeaways working with different cultures?
Okay. So I have worked very closely with folks in India, with folks in America because I was there, and also folks in Sweden. Sweden was Spotify headquarters, and I would go there once every 6 to 8 weeks. So I spent a lot of time over there. I think, so if I'm sitting in one place and trying to communicate with people, first thing I need to be able to give them all the information they need because of the time zone challenges, right? That was one of our biggest things. And I ended up working, sitting in the US, I ended up talking to folks in India who were trying to get things done on the ground here. I needed their inputs, and I had the engineers, majority of them, sitting in Sweden. A few of us, based on what we were doing, I would also be working with local engineers, either in Boston or New York. One thing was make sure that everybody has the information that they need. So I was like, whether they want it or not, let them have access to more information rather than be like, I don't have this. Right? So that really helped because, and it was all in like a channel so that people can go back and refer to it. 100 million things going on, you can't keep everything in mind. So they could go back and refer to it. So I tried to make sure there was some track of a conversation like that. Also, anytime I work with anybody, I try to tell them that let's do this so that we don't always have to be online at the same time. Because I am a person who gets my creative juices flowing more late nights, and not everybody is working late nights. I respect that. So I make it very clear to them that I will share any thoughts and inputs whenever I can. I don't expect you to reply to me off your working hours, whenever it's convenient. But that way, so say somebody comes up, if it's a time zone thing, then Sweden's going to wake up before America. So the Swedish folks have had a chance to look at what I've given them, and they've had a chance to make sure what they want to share with me. If it's a simple thing, it's just a text message, email, whatever, send it across. I have it ready by the time my workday starts. If it is something more involved, we have a very short overlap over there. So they would have scheduled a meeting. I come in, I can check, I can just have a quick sync with them. So this really worked. Disseminating a lot of information. It's a little hard because as a developer, we don't tend to write documentation and doing this kind of information dissemination. But I wanted to get the job done. I wanted it to be done well, so not just some random thing. I put in the effort, it was appreciated, so I was like, okay, cool, it works.
That's nice. It's really nice to hear a developer say that. Having seen people who are reluctant to communicate, I for one definitely believe in over communication. It's okay. People will take what they want from it, and generally somebody is not waiting on information to proceed with what needs to be done. So,
and the best part of it is when you get a new intern or a new person, you can just be like, hey, just go read that. So there was that also. So
that is so essential. In fact, assimilating new people in an organization, I think is so essential because they're eager to learn. They're hungry to know how the whole setup works, which brings me to one question, especially in the last 1.5 years when people have been working remotely. I wonder how, especially people who join an organization fresh, can assimilate that culture of an organization.
So what I kind of did, and this is because some of my mentors taught me to do that, was as I joined a new organization, I just started noting things down and just like putting them up in some place that was like publicly accessible. Sometimes there would be other people who would add to it, and so now we either have a living document or we have a wiki where a lot of things are documented. So the next person who comes has a slightly better lead there. And in Spotify, there is a very good feedback culture. So like as you're new to the company, people are trying to figure out what's happening, what's not. So you can improve the onboarding process. There's that aspect as well. What else? One-on-one pairing with somebody was another quick way to learn a lot. It's a lot. One-on-one pairing can be a little draining after a few sessions. I'm not a big fan of it, but at least like if I can sit with somebody and learn the key things about it rather than build the code where somebody's typing, I'm watching, I'm going to zone out. But at least sit with them, have a conversation of how things are going once or twice. I think that's useful to get the brain dump. So these are some of the things that I've done.
Nice, Madhavi.
Maybe third or fourth time I would have checked out, so I will not even push for a third or fourth.
Okay.
And then it'll be just like code review. Yeah, code reviews actually was a great way to disseminate information. We've actually done that. Spotify and in my previous companies, wherever we have had really good engineers, the code reviews have been amazing. They haven't just been about the code, because a lot of times people will just tell you a functional requirement, say that this is what we want out of it, and they've not really like created a huge dog, especially when you're building a prototype, right? At that stage is where a lot of these discussions and decisions sometimes it used to happen through the code reviews, and sometimes we would pull it from there and document it in a more nice place. But otherwise, at least it's still there somewhere where you can access it.
That's nice. That's a really nice thing to know, and I hope a lot of people who have just joined organizations do listen to what you've shared here. And I know you have an interest in so many things, and you did something phenomenal in partnership with so many people across the world, which was the 100 stories. Can you share what that experience was like and why you did that?
Okay, so this was basically a project that was, the idea for this came from an NGO, which is now called Lit by Humanity. It's been started by a professor in Hyderabad, and she has been personally working to try and help blind students in their education, like reading out books, recording that so that students can listen to it. It's crazy how many books are out there and what a small percent of it is available in Braille or something of that sort. Audiobooks are now up and coming, but still, textbooks in audiobook format is still a little hard. So she came up with this idea and decided to try this as like a crowdsourcing experiment. And it coincided with the lockdown in India in 2020. So that was the best thing. Now, all the people are just sitting at home and they don't know what to do with themselves, right? So they have a lot of time on their hands as well. So what we did was basically tap into that free time. Because any other time, a lot of people who worked with me in this project would say, I didn't have time to volunteer ever. This is my first volunteering experience. Hearing those stories were like amazing. So what I said, I started recording textbooks, and after that I said I want to do more because I think I've had experience working in these cross-country teams and working remotely and all. I can help do some kind of a project management. So they gave me this project and said, okay, we want to record 100 stories in English, and the reason for this is to help students in India, typically from underprivileged backgrounds, to get access to good English content in Indian voices with Indian accents that they can relate to. So a lot of non-English speakers in India, the problem they're facing is that they cannot understand the US, UK accent or Australian or any of the other accents. So this would help them overcome that. It was as simple as that. And then so we were 3 of us, we sat down and we were like, how do we make this organized? We can't just be like, hey, give me a story. There are bound to be repeats because certain stories are very popular among people, right? So we basically made a list of all the stories, collected them from open source sorry, I shouldn't say open source, books where the copyrights have expired, so which are available in the public domain, right? So we collected stories from them, made a list, cut them into PDF so that each person has access to just one story. Had a tracker, did that. And then we were like, hey, people, who wants to do? There were a bunch of volunteers who had been volunteering. And we said, guys, you guys can participate. Please involve whoever else is happening. This went really well. People loved it. They brought their grandmother, their grandchild, they brought everybody. So we ended up having participants from the age of 11 to 80. So,
amazing.
Yeah, that's how it was. And so we did the 100 Stories project. We ended up recording 104 and people were like, I need more. But we were like, no, we are going to time box this. We have 1 week. And then because in this 1 week, we also had a set of people to do QA for us. So we call them proof listeners because essentially they're listening to this. We asked for samples, got them to listen to it, approve that. If they didn't approve, they had to give feedback. So we actually kind of coached a lot of people who had no idea about tech to even download an app to use a mic. This is how you do the mic. This is how you remove sounds from it. So we were doing a lot of tech support and all of that. So people really found it. They were very excited by it. One thing, they're doing some volunteering. Second thing, they're learning some new skills. So that was very exciting to a lot of people.
What a lovely story, Madhavi. And I'm so glad that you could share it here with us. I'm sure, I hope it inspires a lot more people to get involved and engaged in such projects. So I haven't realized, but we've spoken a lot. And as we close this conversation, I would request you to share a message for people who want to take up a career in tech or become developers.
I would just say pursue your passions and look for some new thing, new challenges. And just because it's new and you don't know like 100% of the things to get that done, don't say no, because just go push yourself. You'll learn a lot of new things. It'll help you gain confidence and just continue. And talk to people. Don't just sit in your silo, because you can build the best things sitting in your silo. But if it is not adopted, then all your effort is gone to waste.
Nice, Madhavi. Thank you. I would certainly look forward to having a lot more conversations with you. But thank you so much for being with us here today.
Thank you for having me, Chitra. This is great. Thank you.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client
and spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.